Good morning. I'm back at you again. Anyway, we're talking now about the blood vessels. And when we talk about blood vessels, we have to first talk about what are the different types of blood vessels and what are their jobs, and a little bit about their construction. So I've got a schematic here on the board, and you can see we have the strongest, most muscular blood vessels are the arteries, and so I have the aorta drawn up here. And so we have the arteries, and they have three layers to them. They have this inner endothelial layer, they have a heavy muscular layer, and then they have a connective tissue layer on the outside, because they are a thick enough, strong enough form of tissue that they have to have their own blood supply and nerve supply to them as well. Remember, we had talked about peripheral about the constriction of the arteries and peripheral resistance. And so they have muscles around the outside of them, and they have to be able to respond to the sympathetic nervous system, causing them to contract. So they are very strong. They carry blood with high pressure in it. They will branch and continue branching until they become a smaller, sort of intermediate size blood vessel called an arteriole. And so arterioles have very little muscle associated with them. They don't really have this connective tissue layer with arteries, with capillaries providing blood to them. They do have a little bit of a muscle layer, and they have this inner endothelial layer, this thin layer on the inside. From them, we have capillaries, and this is where these are the most delicate blood vessels there are. They only consist of a thin, what we call an endothelial layer. It's a very thin, single cell thick layer. And when we talk about the blood and the pressure in the blood vessels, the pressure was very high in the arteries, and then the further you get it from the heart, and as it's branching and moving from one blood vessel to many blood vessels, the pressure is falling. So you have lower pressure in the arterioles to low pressure in the capillaries, and this is where we're going to have the capillaries are leaky, so they allow the fluids to leak out of them, and these fluids are going to be carrying nutrients that are needed by the individual cells. They're also going to be carrying blood gases. So at the capillaries, this is where we're going to be seeing an exchange of the materials that are being carried by the blood. Then the capillaries feed back into a larger blood vessel called a venule, which then feeds into veins and carries the blood back to the heart. One final point that I'm going to talk about in this first short video is something called a meta-arteriole. So in many cases, especially when you think of blood vessels that are to your gut, where you're absorbing nutrients. So after you've eaten, you need to send a lot of blood to the capillaries that are associated with your digestive tract, because this is when you're going to be absorbing nutrients. At other times, when you don't have nutrients that you're picking up between meals, if you will, during these periods of time, you don't need to send as much blood to them, so you can close off some of them using something called a precapillary sphincter. It's a muscle that will close off some of the capillaries. So meta-arterioles have precapillary sphincters that can close them off when they're not needed, such as in the example I gave, when you are not digesting food and you don't need to send as much blood to those portions of your body. All right, so I'm going to stop for now.